Hey everyone, Gamma here. I hope you're all having a lovely weekend. Second video in a row that isn't part of the Cancer Chronicle format. That's because what I'm talking about today is sort of a bit distant from what I would usually put in a Chronicle video. Those tend to be more pieces of targeted advice related to treatment, medication, the sort of diagnosis and recovery. I guess more direct things that I guess aren't openly shut, but they're less, I guess, sort of philosophical and less sort of emotionally, and I don't know, this is sort of more a video of me just talking about my thoughts on some things that I've been thinking about recently, but it's not a traditional video that I make, because we all know that I'm terrible at sticking to formats and time frames, so I apologise for that. So I hope that this is interesting to talk about, but if not, I'll be back to normal with it next week anyway. And it comes about with, so I want to talk about my experience through treatment with, it's not, the intention of this video isn't to preach gospel or to assuade or dissuade anyone in any particular way from any mindset or course of action, but I want to talk about, I guess, my experience, I guess, with faith throughout my life, how that was transformed by being ill, and how it's continued to change over the years since I've been in recovery. So, and I'm aware that this is a slightly ironic video if anyone's watching that's known me in the past 5 years, because I have a history of being, well, firstly, very militantly atheist, I would describe, in the sense that I was very, very averse to entertaining the idea or even the merits of any sort of spirituality or religion. I couldn't understand how it would benefit anybody, what the point of it was, and, you know, even in times before that, very anti-theist, almost, in the sense that I was very against organised religion as a concept, and I was, you know, very much like that archetypal, like, nerdy atheist kid that really just wanted to debate anybody, because I was angry about things that had nothing to do with what we were talking about. So kind of awkward looking back on, because just generally not the sort of way I wanted to conduct myself. But with all the things that I talk about physically, I feel comfortable talking, like being honest, talking about what's going on in my head and sort of the way I feel about things, because I guess in retrospect, I'm an extremely different person now to the person I was about 2 years ago. And I think from what I've seen over the past year, I'd say that I'm happy with some of the changes, and I feel like they do me well, but there are things that I'm not particularly happy with. But I definitely think that overall I'm probably a better person than I was before I got ill. And for me personally, I feel like cancer was, as terrible as it was the catalyst for me really understanding what my life is all about and what's important to me, and just sort of help me think about things in a more useful way. And this is all sort of, so it came about from a conversation I was having with my neighbour recently, where we just happened to be talking about the book that I released last year, which is a shameless plug, I know, but it's not that bad. So if you want to try it, I'd appreciate it. And I realised after we had the conversation, because I lent them a copy, and I thought, some of the things that I wrote in that made perfect sense at the time, but I don't necessarily think them anymore. And I think that that's fine. Obviously, people's views change, like sometimes in either shorter time frames after they say things that can publish them. And it sort of got me evaluating sort of how my views have changed in the last year, in the last 2 years, and sort of how radically different they are. And I think, excuse me, I think going through something like cancer and being faced with your own mortality, I think that is the major catalyst for this sort of spiritual journey, but not in the way that you might expect. I think there's very much a stereotype that if people find faith when they're going through major illness, that tends to be viewed as a form of bargaining, which to an extent I do understand the reasoning, But I always like making it clear that that wasn't really the case for me. It wasn't that, because a lot of these conversations I had sort of when I was in hospital beds or when I was having my chemo, and it was more like these conversations with myself, thinking about just the way life and death works, and why am I where I am right now, and where am I going, and what's the point of me being here? Is there a point? And I think to a level it is informed partially by the fact that I got lucky and I survived, because despite my newfound faith and the comfort it brings to me, I can't imagine the way that I view faith these days. As someone who's recently joined the Church of England, I don't think the way I view it is necessarily a comfort to to people who don't get better. I don't think it is. So at the time of doing treatment, I reached a conclusion I was happy with, in that I viewed that if there was a higher power, and I reached a conclusion that there was, then they weren't this personified entity. Like, they didn't have a character in the way that we do in sort of the Abrahamic faiths, where, you know, God and Jesus are, they have personalities, and they have like, they're identifiable, and they have particular views. I didn't see it as that. I viewed that any higher power would exist simply to orchestrate the randomness of the universe. And what I mean by that, or at least I think I meant by that, was that yes, there was something in charge, and it's responsible for what I experience and what exists around me, but that there is no malice in the harshness that I was experiencing at the time. And I think it gave me comfort to know that there was something greater than myself, but that I hadn't been made ill because I'd done something wrong. Because in the past, and even recently in the last year, it's still thoughts I struggle with, the idea that, you know, maybe I deserve to get ill because in the past I haven't been historically the greatest of people. Despite, you know, in more recent times, even before illness, doing my best to try and be the best person. I know that as human beings, we sometimes fall short of that mark. So those are thoughts that I do carry with me, and they're things that I still struggle with. But in the last year, I've pivoted and started moving in the direction, well, to the point of joining the church, where I do view it more as there's the Abrahamic God that actually does exist and does have a will and does have a character, which is something that I've been figuring out recently, because I've been trying to understand why. And I have in general, and that's sort of what I wanted to talk about, especially to clarify the whole bargaining side of it with, I wasn't laying in a hospital bed thinking, you know, or saying aloud, if you make me better, I'll convert, I'll be a good God-fearing individual. Because at the time, I still rejected the idea that there was somebody that I could communicate with whose decision-making would be influenced by my pleas. It wasn't like that. It was simply an entity that orchestrated the events around me impartially. So, if anything, it introduces far more complicated questions that I haven't made this video in an attempt to answer, because there are far cleverer people than me who I don't even think would make attempts. Because I understand that faith to somebody like me, as somebody who views my cancer and my illness almost as a prompt to try and improve my life, because before a Christian I describe myself as a stoic, in the sense that I'm very devoted to self-improvement and trying to become the best version of myself that I can. And as somebody who believes that, you know, that my God has specific plans for me, and used my illness almost in a way to prompt me to do better things with myself, and down that route of more effective self-improvement, so that I could not only enjoy life but appreciate it and the people in it, and do greater things with myself, which I feel like in the time since I've been ill I have done. I feel like I engage with my work a lot better, with my relationship. I summoned the, I guess, willpower to take the step into moving out on my own and living in my own home just under a year after I finished my treatment. And these are all things that I attribute to my faith, and they're extremely beneficial to me personally. But to somebody who has been told that their cancer is terminal, what comfort is there in that? Because by my own reasoning, a God that has used quite cruel methods to help form me into the person that I aspire to be and help me down that path of self-improvement, by my own logic, has taken that life of somebody else. So that's a thought that I can't rationalise, and that's one that I still struggle with, and conversations that I still have with like the clergy that I'm associated with. And it's conversations that like these that I think, and it's something I see too often, the idea that just because something makes sense mostly, that you can ignore some of the small gaps in that. I think as a hugely historically skeptical person, I can't fully be satisfied with the idea that I can't turn a blind eye to inconsistencies like that, or worse yet, perhaps I'm thinking about it in a bad way still. I don't think anybody ever reaches a full sense of enlightenment where they know exactly what truth is and what the truth is and what isn't. But I think it's still important to be skeptical of everything, of authority, of the way information is presented, the way that people engage with us to a healthy degree. I wouldn't wander into the realms of paranoia, but questions are very good, and I think that when you stop asking them and you accept the status quo, then you do yourself a disservice, because all you can do by asking questions is reach that greater level of truth, even if it's uncomfortable. I think it's our responsibility as humans almost to pursue rationality to the point of it being a fault, even if it sometimes is painful. And as somebody who's still quite new to faith, I have a lot of questions, and there are still things that I struggle with, especially because I felt so emotionally connected to people that I did treatment with. And these are things that me from 5 years ago probably would get quite frustrated with me now about. So I'm definitely further along in that spiritual journey, and I'm proud of the progress that I've made with it. But there's still a long way to go in terms of the questions I want to feel comfortable answering, and things that I want to be, to help me take greater pride in my faith and to continue to connect with it further, and hopefully to a point continue to share with it with people. But it'd be interesting to see what other people's thoughts are on it, and how faith has helped you or how it's confused you during treatment, because it is not a one-size-fits-all. It's like treatment in a way. It's not a one-size-fits-all thing. It's a very personal thing. But for those who are willing, I think it'd be excellent to have a discussion on it. I think I'm probably going to call it there. By the time this goes up, it'll probably be closer to midnight. I'm sorry about that. It's a night owl thing. I only feel comfortable doing certain types of work at night time when I'm more isolated. But I hope this video is useful. I hope it prompts slightly more unorthodox conversation than the ones I usually like to have. And it'd be interesting to get your thoughts on it. And if you do enjoy it, engaging with the page in any way, going to the Instagram page to send a message so we can have a conversation, liking and subscribing or commenting, sort of anything like that is all really helpful. And I appreciate all of you. Thank you for stopping by, and I look forward to seeing you all soon. So take care, everyone.